Welcome to episode 204 of On Record PR. I'm Gina Rubel, CEO and General Counsel at Furia Rubel Communications. I cannot believe it's 2026. And I am here with our Vice President, Jennifer Simpson. Carr. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Gina. Happy New Year.
How is it 2026? I don't know, the longest year ever and the fastest year ever, right?
Yeah,
2025.
2025 has been trying.
And this is season 7. How crazy is that?
I know. I know. I can't believe it. I remember planning to launch this at the LMA conference in April of 2020 and then having to pivot to learning how to record on Zoom and Teams.
Last year, our first episode of season 6 was a conversation about what would keep law firm leaders up at night in 2025. I know we hit some good topics. Little did we know everything that was coming. But we did
Yes.
talk about flexibility, talent, and culture, and I think technology.
Mhm.
So today we're taking those 2025 concerns and comparing them against you know, this year, the issues that we know are top of mind for law firms, for their leaders, or at least some of those issues. The themes are similar, but the stakes are different.
So it does feel like there's been a lot of change and uncertainty this year. I know that the big question we've been asking and clients have been asking is what comes next? Things came at us fast and furious starting in January. In my opinion, the what comes next question is pretty important because many firms, particularly the clients that we work with, have been planning for change, have been adapting to what's happened in 2025 and responding the best that they can, based on their culture, their leadership. But many of the pressures we talked about in 2025 feel pretty real this year. Primarily AI, those issues felt a little bit more abstract this time last year, and now they're showing up in partner and executive committee conversations. We know that there have been client expectations that have changed, how budget conversations happen, and how firms are thinking about the future of the firm and the future of their lawyers.
So, in our what comes next conversations for law firm leaders for 2026, I don't think we're really talking about predictions or trends for trend's sake, but the priorities our listeners are already grappling with and how those priorities are evolving. Is that what we're discussing today, Jen?
That's true. And our goal is to keep this very practical for our listeners. So let's talk about what's carried over, what has intensified for clients and the industry, and how leadership can frame priorities going into the new year. So maybe let's kick it off with what feels familiar. Flexibility. I think, again, it's crazy to think in 2026 we're still talking about lessons learned from COVID, but flexibility is critical. Change continues to come quickly, and firms need to be able to adjust without losing momentum. So, Gina, my question for you is what feels different?
Not a lot. Um, yeah. Flexibility, it's interesting. Just yesterday, I read an article about desk wars in RTO and return to office because a lot of companies don't even have room for everybody, but they're requiring people to return to the office. So I thought that was really interesting. So flexibility is being tested. A year ago, it was about staying open to change. But now it's about whether firms can actually act on it. And, I always say actions speak louder than words. That's not my cliche. It's been known for many years, but it's true. And that's what people are seeing. Leaders are asking really tough questions. When priorities shift, how fast can we respond? Um, I can tell you in this year, we've written more incident response plans than in any other year, and probably in our 24 years combined. Leaders are asking, what's next? What happens to our strategic plan after the plan is written? How do we get from point A to point B? Um, how do we deal with M&As or lateral departures? Because it's happening constantly with every firm. Um, some more than others, but even for those, there are really good ways to manage those things. So flexibility, I think, Jen, is key.
Yeah, and from my perspective, flexibility in this year isn't about being willing to change. It's about whether the firms, as I said earlier, the culture, the structure, their decision-making process can support change when it matters to the firm. So talent is another area that hasn't gone away as a concern or a priority, but we know that in 2026, the challenges that firms and leadership are facing and the opportunities that lie ahead are showing up differently now.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me, Jennifer, was when we were at the Whipple conference this year and we met several people, none of which we can name because they were high profile government lawyers who were out of jobs. And they were out of jobs because they either refused to work for ICE or refused to pledge certain loyalties without making this a political conversation. And so the talent pool has changed. There's a lot of opportunity. There's still a lot of focus on recruiting and retaining associates and laterals, but cultures, value, mentoring, and messaging are all playing an even more important role. And those things matter at a level that I haven't seen before, especially with people who are now going to law firms who are working in government roles. We're seeing that hugely on the East Coast. And
Mm.
I can't say I've seen it as much all over the country, but I've definitely seen it with all the East Coast offices, including DC, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and Miami. So things to be thinking about as firms are looking at their talent and the culture wars that are taking place.
So I know we've also identified a growing awareness in law firm leadership, just how difficult it is to replace that lost institutional knowledge in leadership. I I know that traditionally hasn't always been valued, but particularly on the client side, clients care that someone's been working, a lawyer's been working with them for a decade or more. And so, what happens to that knowledge and that leadership for clients and the firm? So, all of this leads to bigger questions. Are partners aligned around the firm's direction? Are associates aligned around what the future of the firm looks like? Do they see opportunity where they are? Do they see a path forward? And do they feel invested in the next chapter of the firm if the firm has even defined what that looks like?
And Jennifer, that's key. If the firm has defined what that looks like, more often than not, we hear that associates have no idea what the trajectory of the firm is. More than not, we hear that partners are not all on the same page, rowing in the same direction. And when I say more often than not, that's not an exaggeration. I'd say that that's probably 75% of the time. So there's a huge opportunity this year for things like leadership development to be part of that conversation. And I wanted to be clear that to manage is not the same thing as to lead. And we did a whole podcast on that. So I want to make sure we include that in our show notes.
Mm.
Leadership is not management. And most of us as lawyers, were not taught leadership. I've It's been decades that I've taken courses in leadership development. I've worked with executive coaches. I learned from all of you, and we all learn from one another. We read the Harvard Business Review all the time, and especially their management tip of the day, which in fact I shared with a client today because it was so relevant. So firms have a deep legal talent, but fewer people who are they're not prepared to lead. They get put on a management committee because they have a big book of business and they're an equity partner, but they've never even looked at a P&L.
Hmm.
So and they're growing pains, right? It's industry growing pains. So while that may not be true for an AmLaw 100 firm, it may or may not. It very well will be true for mid-market firms and smaller firms. I
Mm.
can almost guarantee it. So leadership development is so critically important. Um, I can't stress it enough. So even if you just start with the Harvard Business Review and sharing some of the articles there and the management tips of the day, because leadership, if you want to look more like a corporation and less like a hotel for lawyers, where everybody has their own book and everybody's doing their own thing, but there's no true cohesive culture, then learning how to lead matters.
And I appreciate the Harvard Business Review management tip of the day example because something I value about our executive slash leadership management team is that not only do we each read those, most days one of us is sharing how it applies to us. So it's not reading it for reading its sake. It's actually what is the tip? What is the context? And at Furia Rubel Communications, what does that mean for us and for our people? So, Gina,
Absolutely.
let's pause here for a message from our sponsor, and then when we get back, we will touch on the last few points that are keeping
Sounds good.
leaders up at night.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses worldwide. With an expert team positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by an international faculty, Furia Rubel enhances our clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com.
So, Gina, we're back from our sponsor break, and technology, especially artificial intelligence and generative AI, continues to be a major focus. Again, we are not where we were at this point last year. The conversation has matured, the technology has advanced so quickly, and fewer leaders are asking whether or not to use it. The conversation has shifted to what does it change at our law firm? How does it change the way we do work, the way we bill? What does it impact? How does it expedite or make more efficient the work we're doing for clients? So we're seeing much more far-reaching impacts, like how does work get done? To your point about talent, how do junior lawyers learn now? How is our efficiency measured, right? And how does it impact how clients think about value and outcomes?
Chad, it's really interesting. There's so many ways it's affected the industry, and once efficiency improves, pricing naturally comes into the spotlight. So again, we go back to that idea of leadership, really understanding that pricing is a major component of marketing and how AI is affecting that, because clients want credibility, clarity, predictability, and a clear connection between the costs and the outcomes. We see that as a PR agency. Our clients, our law firm clients, are seeing it with their GCs. That's pushing firms to think more seriously about pricing models and how they explain the value that they deliver. And value delivery, that idea of benefits is, again, it comes down to talking to the people in your marketing department because they understand the language. This is what we study. This is what we know how to do. It also requires internal alignment. Partners need to understand how technology fits into the firm's long-term approach. It's not just a tool anymore. It's like, I remember when we were rolling out the fax machine. That's how old I am. I hate to tell people, and how we had to explain that that was going to make it quicker and more efficient than sending something by snail mail. And then it was, oh, well, now we have this thing called email.
Mhm.
We need to be talking about how these are part of business, and firms need to be intentional about their training so that lawyers continue to develop judgment, strategy, and client skills along with technology, but also, I have to say this, discoverability. So if you're using AI, what is discoverable in terms of litigation? Because that was the next big part of the conversation in 2025 that's only going to get more refined in 2026.
And to your point about pricing and billing, it is a big part of the conversation. I mean, clients have told general counsel and in-house legal teams have said for years that client bills are one of the most important pieces of communication that they receive, and they are expecting now, if you are using technology, that that is part of the communication around how it impacts their bill.
Absolutely.
So, our final thought for 2026 is that there have been a lot of conversations happening now around structure and ownership of firms that were not happening even a year ago at this time. So, one of those is how firms think about investment, how they grow technology, infrastructure in a much more demanding environment. Um, Even though firms aren't currently changing their structures, they are starting to think more critically about sustainability and about long-term planning.
It's interesting, Jennifer, because leaders are also weighing how new models and external pressures could affect independence, culture, and client trust. And as a former litigator and licensed attorney, I definitely have concerns about private equity getting involved in the ownership structure. And I think that's going to continue to grow as part of the conversation. And these aren't decisions most firms can or will or should make overnight, but they are conversations that leaders can't avoid, um, especially with the M&A happening. I mean, 2025 was unbelievable with the number of mergers and acquisitions. So
Mhm.
having clarity, even if it's simply that this is how we think about it today, is going to help reduce that uncertainty inside the firm.
So, when we think about what comes next, I know that there are a number of priorities that keep surfacing with our clients in conversations. So, I thought we could close the conversation by what we personally feel is our top kind of takeaway. So, for me, our client communication for firms is at the top of the list, especially around what we just discussed, which is clarity about technology and clarity about pricing and how those two things impact one another. So it's about being able to clearly articulate how technology and pricing decisions fit into the firm's identity, into its culture, and how that story is told to clients. And so as we think about a key takeaway for our listeners, that consistency in messaging doesn't happen by accident, and you can't expect your lawyers and your staff to come up with that messaging on their own. So, for firm leaders listening, I encourage you to make sure that you have that conversation internally. Think about how the technology and pricing message should come from your firm, what you want to say, and then help your attorneys and practice leaders and client teams, anyone who's client facing, help them align on that message so that the story that you want to be told to your clients about value, technology, pricing, it's all aligned and consistent from every part of the firm.
I agree, Jen. For me, it's really about, and I think it's everything we've talked about. So pricing, messaging, technology, leadership, it's all of those things, but it's also a key component for 2026 is going to be partner engagement and retention, not just compensation, but alignment, leadership opportunities, and a shared sense of direction. Uh, it is so expensive to lose a partner, and it is so expensive to recruit the right partners. And so retention and engagement is key. Part of this is comes down to what we already talked about, leadership development, and firms that invest in preparing that next generation of leaders are going to be better positioned for whatever comes next. And God knows what that's going to be. Um, I know I'm very happy that we are in a new year and that 2025 is over.
Hmm.
And I'm really excited to be in season 7 with you, Jennifer. And hopefully 2026 is just going to be a great year. That's my hope.
Yeah, me too. Well, thank you to our listeners for joining. If you've enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to share it with a friend, a colleague, maybe a law firm leader who is navigating one or all of the challenges we've discussed today. If on record PR is part of how you stay informed now, we'd appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It does help more law firm leaders find us and these great conversations. Please tune in next week. Sarah Larson, our Executive Vice President, will be joining the show to discuss how AI, GEO, and AEO are redefining press release visibility, which I'm very excited to learn more about. Thank you,
Oh, me
Gina.
too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Isabel Horan and Christian Yamula. Visit www.onrecordpr.com for resources and more information.